August the 14th, 1981, New York City. Dominic Sonny Black Napolitano, a captain in the Bonanno crime family, walks into the Motion Lounge Bar in Brooklyn. He hands the barman the keys to his apartment, a large bundle of cash, and the diamond-encrusted rings from his fingers. He tells the barman he's going to a meeting and doesn't know if he's coming back. He is driven across town to a house in Staten Island. The meeting is in the basement. Sonny Black was killed because he had brought a spy, Donnie Brasco, into the inner sanctum of the mafia. He was really Special Agent Joe Pistone.
Did I want to see him get killed? No. Would I rather have him gone to jail? Yeah.
Thanks to Pistone's 6 years undercover, over 200 mobsters will be convicted, and one of the biggest mafia families brought down. It was the most successful undercover operation in FBI history. But the operation that would one day bring down the mafia would start on a far smaller scale. In 1976, New York was facing a wave of truck hijackings.
These loads were sometimes worth $200,000-300,000, and the mob guys would hijack the truck, stick the truck up, take it, and then sell it to fences.
The FBI decided to initiate an undercover operation to target these fences in an effort to stem the flow of hijackings. They selected Joe Pistone for the operation. Pistone had racked up extensive undercover experience over his 15 years as an FBI agent.
I always worked undercover cases. I worked all criminal matters, bank robberies, prostitution cases, worked a lot of gambling cases.
Pistone had grown up in an Italian-American family in Paterson, New Jersey, and knew well the sort of people he might encounter undercover.
Growing up in a neighborhood, you always know who the mob guys are in the neighborhood, but, you know, my family's situation was, you know, you keep away from those guys, you know, don't get involved with them.
To get to the fences, the FBI created a cover for Pistone. A jewel thief.
We came up with burglar and jewel thief because when you're in an undercover situation, you can't become involved in any violence, crime of violence. So you come up with a legend that doesn't tend to lead toward violence. Not many jewel thieves in jail for murder, you know. So I went to school, learned all about jewelry, precious gems, the locks, alarms, safes. So we took about 6-7 months to prepare for this operation.
With his training complete, Pistone was ready to embark on his mission. In 1976, he left FBI headquarters with a new ID as Donnie Brasco, unaware he would not return for over 6 years. His job was to find a way to infiltrate the hijackers.
You don't just walk into a place and say, hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, jewel thief. I want to start doing business with you. It doesn't work that way.
Pistone had moved from his home in New Jersey, leaving his wife and children behind, and rented an apartment in Manhattan.
The plan was we had certain bars and restaurants that we knew these guys hung out in. And the idea was for me to frequent these places and get my face seen, get known, and hopefully become engaged in conversation.
It would take many months until people trusted the new face as a local.
Well, the first 6 months I would just hit these different restaurants. Some were up in the Upper East Side, some were down in Little Italy. I mean, they were basically all in Manhattan. I would just frequent, go in, sit at the bar, order a meal at the bar, order a drink at the bar, and just hang around for a couple hours. You can't form a pattern. You can't go into the same place the same day at the same time. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a 5-day-a-week job. It's a 7-day-a-week job.
For Pistone, it was slow and repetitive work.
Did I enjoy it? I endured it. I put it that way. I endured it. I'm not really a bar guy. I don't drink. I mean, you know, I'll drink one beer, maybe one glass of wine. I wasn't in love with being an undercover agent. To me, it was part of my job.
Finally, after 6 months of targeting the bars of Manhattan, Pistone thought that his face had become familiar enough, and he decided to try his luck with a barman whom he suspected had criminal connections.
I finally felt, well, I gotta make a move here. Come in one night and, hey, Donnie, how you doing? Okay. We start talking, and I had a package of diamonds. And I said, I need X amount of money for these. Say $10,000. As an undercover, you gotta know what the street price of stuff is we call swag. You know, the difference of buying these diamonds at Tiffany's than buying off somebody in the street. And he didn't say a word, he just picked it up, put it in his pocket.
Days passed, and despite regular visits back to the bar, the package was never mentioned by the barman or by the man he knew as Donnie Brasco. But a fortnight later, there's a breakthrough.
After about 2 weeks, I come in one night. He said, somebody left this for you. It's an envelope, I pick it up. And the money's in there.
It was the payment for the jewels. This was the first important step in establishing Pistone's credibility as the criminal Donnie Brasco.
Now he knows it, you know, I mean, I don't have to spell it out to him that I'm a jewel thief, you know? And it went from there.
Over the next few months, the barman started to invite Donnie out, introducing him to numerous contacts.
The places we went to were all after-hours joints, you know, gambling and after hours. And he would introduce me, you know, just as Donnie.
Pistone was being introduced as Donnie Brasco to all sorts of shadowy people. But one introduction in particular would become very significant. The man was known as Gilly, and was not only a fence and a truck hijacker, but was what the mob called a made guy.
made, straightened out, good fellow, wise guy. All those terms mean the same thing. You've been officially inducted into a particular mafia family.
Now, news that Pistone was directly involved with a Maid Mafia member changed the entire nature of the operation. The FBI seized the opportunity and encouraged Pistone to get in with Gilly and his crew. Pistone used all that he had learned at the FBI to convince them that he was a jewel thief, but they wanted to see the spoils of his crimes.
You have to be an earner, you know. They're not taking me in because they like my looks, you know. You have to see that I have the ability to make money.
Suddenly, Pistone needed to get hold of a lot more jewelry from his supposed robberies.
In the operation as a jewel thief, I mean, I wasn't going out robbing Tiffany's to get the jewels. Any jewelry that I brought around came from the FBI. It was confiscated jewelry that we got from U.S. Customs. You know, there was jewelry that was confiscated. Other times I would bring around watches.
As Pistone began handing over more and more jewelry, it seemed that he was convincing them that he was a genuine thief. But then, some of the gang members started asking for his help in their own robberies, breaking into homes, something he was reluctant to do as an FBI agent.
They'd ask me, you know, can you get by this alarm? Can you get in, you know? And a couple times I said, no, I can't bypass that alarm system. I can't, you know, I can't get into this place. I can't do this safe. And they got mad.
Pistone was called to a meeting by Gilly at his club with two other gangsters, Frankie and Patsy.
They locked the door. Patsy puts his gun on the table and he said, you know, Donnie, he said, unless you convince me that you're a really great jewel thief, he said, the only way you're going out of here is rolled up in that rug.
They began to question Pistone on every detail of his past.
Where you from? Who did you know? What'd you do?
The questioning continued for 5 hours. Eventually, Gilly, convinced by Pistone's performance, called a halt to the meeting. But then, as Frankie and Patsy were backing down, Pistone took a massive gamble to increase his credibility.
If somebody calls you out on the street, you gotta be mad. And the only thing they're gonna understand here is some kind of force. So I hit Frankie. Patsy jumps on me, he starts punching me, starts beating me. But I can't do anything because he's a made guy. You can't hit a made guy. That's a penalty of death. So I just keep hitting Frankie. Then finally they break it up.
The fight didn't just make him seem a credible gangster, but it also gave Pistone the excuse to distance himself from the increasing violence of Gilly's crew.
I went to Gilly and I said, Gilly, you know, all due respect, but I don't want to be involved with these guys anymore. If they have something lined up, they have a score lined up, they have something they want to rob lined up, don't even tell me about it.
Believing Pistone was the real deal, Gilly introduced him to some major figures from another mafia family, the Bonannos. First, he met Tony Mirra.
Tony Mirra was a major drug dealer, one mean guy. He was the type of guy, he just abused everybody, but he made tons of money for the family through his drug dealings.
And Mira introduced him to Lefty Ruggiero, a hitman who had a reputed 23 killings to his name.
Lefty Ruggiero was what I would call 24-hour gangster. He was on being a gangster every minute of the day.
But Lefty Ruggiero had a trait that was invaluable for Pistone's operation.
He was a great historian as far as knowledge of the mafia, how it worked and how it would work. And I gained a lot of valuable information from him.
Through Mira and Ruggiero, Pistone was able to shine a torch on the inner workings of a mafia family, something that the FBI, until then, had known surprisingly little about.
He could recount to us who was in, who was out. He could recount what rackets they were involved in. He could recount what's coming up in the future. The people he was involved in were particularly vicious. You know, who was going to kill who or who was on the outs.
In 1978, the operation had a major breakthrough. Tony Mira was jailed for drug trafficking. And Lefty Ruggiero seized an opportunity to cash in on Pistone's skill as a good earner and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Pistone would operate exclusively under Lefty as his partner. He would now be much more closely involved in Bonanno family business. And critically, Lefty was part of a crew run by one of the most powerful captains in the Bonanno family, Dominic "Sonny Black" Napolitano.
Sonny Black was an effective, important leader, a capo. He had about 15 to 20 members in his crew, about 10 or 12 made guys, and probably at least 20 or 30 other what are known as associates or wannabes who hang around and work with the family. He dressed effectively like the consummate or quintessential mobster. T-shirts, dark suits, heavy on jewelry, rings, pinky rings, swaggered, talk tough.
Pistone was now hanging out daily with Sonny Black at his social club, the Motion Lounge in Brooklyn.
The average day in the life of a wise guy is not as exciting as you might think. You know, you might meet up at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. You hang out at the social club all day, and, you know, your conversation is about what you're going to rob, what you're going to steal, who's stealing from you, how much money you're making in this operation, how much money you're making in that operation. It's a steady grind every day.
Thanks to Pistone, the FBI were in a position they had never anticipated. They had an agent as an active member in a major crew in the New York Mafia.
There was a lot of excitement because up to this point, nobody had infiltrated to the point that they were running around with made guys in any family.
Pistone was now even better placed to gather material on a wide range of mafia activities.
At this stage, I was gathering a lot of intelligence information, drug deals, extortion, hijacking, political corruption, politicians, law enforcement people that were corrupt. So it was a myriad of information.
But more than that, by working with Lefty, he was able to learn who the major players were in the Bonanno family and other New York families, giving the FBI names of captains and bosses.
I was finding out who the upper echelons, the structure of the family, who was basically running the family. So a lot of it had to do with intelligence information that we didn't know by doing investigations and that we weren't getting from informants. We showed we can go after and get the upper echelon versus, you know, versus the guys on the bottom doing all the dirty work.
Pistone's intelligence was helping the FBI build a much clearer picture of not just how the Bonanno family was run, but the whole mafia. And what emerged was how much the various mafia families were in fact cooperating with each other.
You came to realize that this was not a monolithic organization. These folks were working together. They might have been individual families that, you know, for work purposes and for power purposes, but in the scheme of things, they were working together, sharing these criminal activities.
And Pistone's success was not limited to just the mafia in New York. With his strong credibility, he could now vouch for other undercover agents and instigate connections with other mafia families, as far away as Los Angeles. In Milwaukee, he was so successful, he even managed to set up a face-to-face meeting with the mob boss there, the first time an FBI agent had sat down with such a high-ranking mobster. In Florida also, the FBI had been attempting to infiltrate the mafia. They had set up a club, the King's Court, which they had hoped would be a beacon for Florida's mobsters. Pistone saw a way to help the operation by suggesting that Sonny Black become a partner in the club. The idea appealed to Sonny, and he sent Pistone and Lefty to Florida to check it out. Pistone now discovered that, like many city wise guys, Lefty had hardly ever left his New York borough.
Everybody thinks that mob guys are so worldly and they know everything. I mean, they're really parochial, and Lefty was no different. You know, had no idea how to make a plane reservation, you know, because a lot of time, most of the time, when they wanted to go somewhere, the plane tickets were, you know, back in the day before the computers, they were stolen, you know, from travel agents.
When Lefty saw the club, he reported favorably back to Sonny, and Sonny liked what he heard. But to operate in Florida, Sonny Black would still need the permission of the local mafia, headed by Santo Trafficante.
That's when Sonny then starts moving ahead to get a meeting with Trafficante.
Sonny flew to Miami to meet the Florida boss to propose running illegal gambling operations together from the club. Trafficante agreed to the deal. It was a breathtaking achievement for the FBI.
Here we got two major bosses that we married up together to become involved in illegal activities with. I mean, unheard of. So that's, that was a big thing.
The FBI had the back office of the King's Court fully installed with microphones and cameras.
The King's Court was wired for audio and video, but it was only in the office, not the club, because the patrons were regular people who didn't know it was an FBI operation.
Pistone and other undercover agents started to stage drug deals with mafia mobsters there.
What do you want you at, Tom? Good. I can walk in the place in this town.
It was a gold mine of intelligence for the FBI. But for the Bonannos, it was a major money-making operation. And Sonny Black loved it.
Every time you went to the club, it was packed. I mean, it was a big hit among the locals, you know, and everybody that went in there was a citizen, you know. So the club was making money. We're doing illegal gambling, casino nights, and illegal bingo games, which was big down there because of the elderly population. You can make a lot of money running bingo because they were taking the big cut for themselves.
Pistone was impressing Sonny Black, So much so that Sonny asked him to head up the operation in Florida. But more importantly for the FBI, in another promotion for Pistone, he no longer had to report to Lefty Ruggiero, but would answer directly to Sonny Black. Pistone now had access to one of the most important captains in the New York Mafia. Nothing like this had ever been done before. Now based in Florida, on trips back to New York, Pistone would even stay at Sonny's house, and they would spend hours feeding Sonny's racing pigeons on his roof.
I got to know Sonny Black pretty good, and although he was a stone-cold killer and a gangster, Sonny was the kind of guy you could spend time with. I mean, he would talk about the gambling, the drugs. He would talk about, who's the power in the family, all that. But you could also have other conversations with him. He loved those pigeons. Like I said, we go up every morning and he'd feed them and change their water and give me a history lessons on pigeons. I mean, I never listened to it, but I had told the FBI guys, when those pigeon coops come down, you can say goodbye to Sonny Black. He's gone.
Pistone's close relationship with Sonny Black now gave him even more access to information within the Mafia. He discovered that one faction of the Bonanno family, recent Sicilian immigrants known as Zips, were enormous drug importers. They used a series of pizza restaurants to distribute the drugs.
The Zips were Sicilians brought over to run the pizza shops that they had all over New York and Pennsylvania, not only to distribute the heroin, but to use these Zips for murders and anything else that they needed from them.
Based on Pistone's information, the FBI launched a major investigation into the Zips pizza restaurant drug trade. But they couldn't act on it immediately, because if Pistone's identity were revealed to the Mafia, he would be killed instantly.
Every day going to work like that, knowing he could easily be made or betrayed, and his life would have been worthless. And yet he did it for years.
As long as the person's undercover, you can't do anything with that information until they surface, or you jeopardize them.
But in fact, by now, there was a far more serious threat to Pistone's life. Tony Mirra, Pistone's first contact in the Mafia, was released from jail and furious that Pistone was earning money from Sonny Black and Lefty. He wanted revenge.
What you have to remember, there's a lot of jealousy and envy in the mob. Mirra gets out of jail, and he's jealous because he thinks I'm making a lot of money and because I'm real close to Sonny Black. So he goes and he goes to his captain and says that I should be with him and not Lefty because he's the one that brought me around.
But Sonny, keen to keep his cut of Pistone's earnings, was reluctant to pass him back to Mirra.
Mirra goes to Sonny, and Sonny says no.
Mirra then took his complaint a stage further and called for the other capos to arbitrate the decision. Lefty and Sonny were called on to defend their claim on Pistone in a series of meetings. Lefty would phone Pistone after each one to let him know what was happening, and Pistone would secretly record their conversations.
Hey, Donnie, let me tell you something. I had a 4.5-hour meeting about you today.
For what?
Donnie, don't say for what.
Well, Left, you say don't say for what. How do I know? I don't even know what you're talking about.
I won you, and I'm going to keep you.
Well, that's right.
All right? I'm not giving you up, and so is Sonny. We own Donnie, and we giving up Rocky. Now, you give up my prick, I says. I warned you. I'm not giving you up. I'll die with you.
Well, how does Sonny stand tonight with us?
Where's he stand? He's not giving you up. Not giving you up. Ain't nobody having you.
Hey, I don't want no part of Mirror.
Sonny Black and Lefty won and got to keep Pistone as their own. But Mirror wasn't finished yet, and in an act of revenge, he would do something that would instantly threaten Pistone's life.
So he figures that, well, if I can't have him, nobody's going to have him. So then what Mirror does is he puts in a beef with all the captains that I stole $250,000 in a drug deal. And, you know, that's a no-no. You don't steal money from the family.
The severity of the accusations demanded a series of high-level meetings, or sit-downs. A sit-down was, in effect, a trial. High-ranking mobsters from the Bonanno family in New York, including some of the Sicilian Zips and Bonannos from far away as Canada, were called in to judge the accusations leveled at Pistone. If Pistone were found guilty, he would be executed immediately.
If you lose a sit-down, they're not going to, you're going to get killed right then. I mean, it's not like, you know, they're going to give you, you know, we're going to give you a month to get your affairs in order.
Rocky admitted that you made $250,000.
Who did Rocky tell you?
Anthony Mirror and his men. Don't you understand?
He's a lying son of... He's a lying son of... He's lying, Left.
I don't give a
He's a liar. I'd never cut any junk money up with him.
Why don't count?
Why does this guy want to, you know,
He
start...
wants you bad.
So what do we do now?
I don't give a but you can't
I ain't
help
afraid
me
of
out.
anybody.
You can't help me out. I have to handle it. Without you.
And I ain't afraid of Mirror either. When's this thing all gonna end with this
It
guy?
ain't gonna end.
Sonny spent 3 hours fighting for Donnie. Eventually, his life was spared.
Sonny Black wins the sit-down.
Pistone may have survived the sit-down, but he had made a serious enemy of Tony Mirror. The FBI were concerned the operation was becoming too dangerous and began to consider pulling Pistone out.
They were talking about closing the operation down.
But Pistone thought otherwise and managed to convince his boss, Jules Bonavolonte, to continue just a little while longer.
I convinced Jules, there's nothing to worry about, you know? I mean, I can handle this.
By the end of 1980, FBI agent Joe Pistone had been undercover in the Mafia for nearly 5 years. His intelligence had been invaluable to the FBI. They had wiretaps on senior members of the New York Mafia, cases open on Sicilian heroin trafficking, the Milwaukee mob, and Colombian drug deals in Florida. And as a trusted confidant to one of the most powerful captains in the New York Mafia, the outlook for Pistone and the FBI was looking good. But soon, Pistone's operation was to become far more complicated. In Florida, a Las Vegas night was planned for the King's Court, an illegal gambling evening with craps, roulette wheels, and blackjack. The event was scheduled for January the 17th, 1981. Sonny and a number of New York wise guys had flown down for the event. The local sheriff had been paid to turn a blind eye.
I was right there when he paid the guy off. The guy assured us that everything was taken care of, you know.
At first, the evening went well.
The place was mobbed. King's Court was mobbed. Had all kind of money. I mean, we were making all kind of money.
But when the night was in full swing, something went terribly wrong. The club was raided by the local police. And Sonny, who refused to provide identification, was taken to jail. He was bailed the following day, but was furious.
Sonny spent the night in a can. He wasn't too happy the next day, believe me. He wasn't too happy the next day.
Sonny Black was convinced there must have been a rat. Pistone had to be concerned that suspicion might fall on him. But as the crew flew back to New York, there was further cause for concern. Months earlier, in a move to impress his mob connections in Florida, Pistone had borrowed a luxury boat from the FBI for a fishing trip with Lefty. But now, Lefty spotted an article in a magazine detailing an FBI sting operation in which agents had posed as Arab sheikhs to entrap corrupt congressmen. The article included a picture of a boat used in the operation. It was the same boat that Pistone had used to impress Lefty Ruggiero.
The boat that we used was on the front page of Newsweek. There's another major undercover operation going called Abscam. It wasn't supposed to get the surface for a long time. But what happened was it got exposed.
Lefty demanded to know how Donnie had got hold of an FBI boat.
I told Lefty, remember this girl we met out in San Diego? And, you know, do you remember she said her brother had a boat in Miami and that we can use it any time? So I said, look, Left, I said, you were there, you know. Even if it is a government boat, they were after, you know, they're after the politicians. They weren't after us. They never came after us. So I got away with that one.
Lefty seemed to buy his story, but Pistone could not be sure he was still completely trusted by either Lefty or Sonny. But then any doubts he might have had disappeared when Pistone was given an astonishing vote of confidence from Sonny Black. Sonny Black proposed Pistone for full membership of the Mafia.
He had to go to every captain in the family and say, hey, I'm going to propose Donnie Brasco. You guys have anything against Donnie? And if one captain says a negative thing, they can't propose you. And all the other captains okayed it.
As a made man, it would be like a letter of introduction to some of the most powerful mobsters in America. Pistone would have much greater access to other parts of the Mafia and some of their most closely guarded secrets. But at FBI headquarters, there was real concern. It was all very well having an agent inside the Mafia, but having an agent inducted to a senior level could compromise the entire operation.
Theoretically, to become a member, you would have had to kill somebody. And their position was that even though he had not had to kill somebody, that would destroy his credibility for the courts.
And dramatic events within the Bonanno family power structure increased concerns in the FBI. The Bonanno family was in the midst of a civil war. And Sonny Black was right at the forefront of it. It had begun 2 years earlier when Sonny Black had taken part in the murder of the boss of his own family, Carmine Galante. And now, Sonny was ordered to take out 3 rival capos. As the violence escalated, there was an increasing risk that Pistone could be killed in the crossfire.
Now that this war was going on, this is the first time everybody's carrying a gun now. Sonny Black gave me a gun to carry. Because guys that were with the other 3 captains were looking to kill us.
He was involved in some of the most vicious territorial wars that were going on in organized crime, so he was right there at the focus point.
And then, Sonny Black put Pistone in a position the FBI had been desperate to avoid. Sonny ordered Pistone to track down a rival mobster, Bruno Indelicato, and kill him.
So Sonny sends me to Florida because that's where they thought Bruno was. And the plan was if I found him, I'd call the FBI, they'd snatch him, we'd make it look like a hit, and then I can go back and say, you know, I took care of him.
But the FBI decided it was far too dangerous and ordered Pistone to pull out of the 6-year operation.
When we ended the operation, he was very upset because I'm sure he felt that if he could have been made, his credibility would have been enhanced.
Can you imagine the kick in the when it comes out, you know, Bonanno Mafia family makes FBI, undercover FBI agent? But I couldn't convince him, so we had to surface.
Two weeks later, with Pistone safely out of the way, Sonny was visited at his club by FBI agents. The agents presented a picture of the 3 of them with a 4th man, one of their most trusted crew members. You know this man as Donnie Brasco. He is, in fact, an FBI agent.
And Sonny said, well, if I see him around, then now I'll know. I mean, he really didn't believe it.
But eventually, Sonny Black began to accept the truth, and the FBI watched as he retreated to his pigeon coop to think over his options. He realized that if Donnie Brasco were an undercover agent, then, as the man responsible for bringing him into the Mafia, he was sure to be killed.
The FBI offered him protection. All he had to do was come forward. He said no. He knew what the results might be, but he wouldn't betray his oath. He decided to go down at the end, and he knew pretty much that he was on a hit list.
2 weeks later, Sonny Black was called to a meeting.
I didn't want to see him get killed, but, you know, he brought it upon himself. You know, when the agents went to talk to him, he could have easily called them later on and said, look, I'm coming in, you know. What kind of deal can I make? But he didn't. He was a real man and he was a real gangster. And that's how we left it. I said, you know, when you see those pigeon coops on the top of Sonny's apartment building getting torn down, he's dead. 17 days later, they start taking the pigeon coops down. That's when they killed him.
Sonny's body was found dumped in a New York river. Symbolically, his hands, which had welcomed an FBI agent into the mafia, had been cut off. The mob now closed in on anyone who had been involved with Donnie Brasco.
They killed Sonny Black. They killed Tony Mira. They killed Jilly. Did I want to see him get killed? No. Would I rather have him gone to jail? Yeah. But it wasn't my doing, in my mind, that got him killed.
The FBI learned that Lefty Ruggiero had been summoned to a meeting where he would be murdered. They intercepted him and arrested him.
He thought it was a hit team, you know, because the agents were in surveillance clothes, just in, you know, nondescript cars. And he thought he was going to get clipped.
With Pistone now out of the firing range, the FBI used his information to go after hundreds of mafia members.
4 years ago, a petty jewel thief known as Donnie Brasco began working his way up inside the mob. Last year, in a New York trial, Brasco unmasked himself. His real name? Joseph Pistone, undercover agent in the FBI.
I think I testified in about 17 different trials. We had 235 convictions. In New York, you know, we knocked out the Bonanno family to a great extent.
Bonanno family, as I know of it, I think they are nothing but a street gang at this point in time.
In Milwaukee, we took down the whole family. You know, the boss, the underboss, a couple of his captains. The same thing in Florida, you know.
A federal grand jury in Tampa today indicted Santo Trafficante and 11 others on racketeering charges.
That includes gambling, extortion, bribery, and narcotics.
In 1985, Pistone testified in the trial of the Sicilian heroin traffickers. Known as the Pizza Connection, it was one of the longest trials in American history.
All the principal defendants in this case were convicted. 18 of 19 defendants overall were convicted. It's an outstanding result. We couldn't have hoped for anything better, and it is a tremendous victory for the effort against the mafia.
And in what became known as the Commission Trial, Pistone identified the heads of the New York families.
They're calling it the biggest sweep of underworld leadership in nearly 30 years. 5 reputed godfathers arrested and indicted in New York.
His evidence and testimony was central in securing convictions on 151 counts. Pistone's operations spelled the beginning of the end for the mob, as gangsters at all levels of the mafia were sent to jail. Amongst them was Lefty Ruggiero, imprisoned for conspiring to murder the 3 capos, distributing drugs, extortion, bank robbery, and illegal gambling in Florida.
So he spent like 15 years in jail. I hate to be the guy that was his cellmate or guard, because he had to be the biggest pain in the arse there ever was.
The mafia responded by placing a $500,000 bounty on Pistone's head. To this day, Agent Joseph Pistone lives under a pseudonym in an undisclosed location. In 1979, the FBI launched a vast electronic surveillance operation at one criminal in particular, Alan Dorfman.
Alan Dorfman was the man that got things done, the power broker.
Alan Dorfman wasn't a mafioso. He wasn't even Italian. He was Jewish. And his weapon was not a gun, but a pen.
Dorfman was a white-collar type thug.
He had no real scruples or morals.
Dorfman's crime was to raid $1 billion pension fund for his mafia bosses.
The pension fund was a gold mine.
As the mafia's banker, he financed their huge casinos in Las Vegas.
He was a very powerful associate because he made money for it.
Dorfman was close to the mafia's heart and in the crosshairs of the FBI. This is the extraordinary story of how the FBI hunted Alan Dorfman, bugged his business, and caused one of the biggest disasters in mafia history. Alan Dorfman need not have been a mobster. After the Second World War, he returned to America a decorated Marine. But he could only find work as a women's self-defense instructor and sports coach, earning just $4,000 a year. Dorfman was going nowhere, and he wanted more. Luckily, he was close to one influential person who could fix him up: his stepfather. Paul Red Dorfman was a tough, old-school Chicago mobster. His power base was in the growing trade union movement, including the mighty Teamsters Union. By 1953, with 1.2 million members working in transport nationwide, a Teamsters strike could paralyze the United States. The Teamsters had what the mob liked: real muscle. An ambitious Teamsters official, Jimmy Hoffa, wanted to become president at the top of the powerful union. Red Dorfman agreed to help.
There was a lot of intelligence information that Hoffa had made accommodations with organized crime in order to rise to the power that he developed.
In return for supporting Hoffa, Red Dorfman wanted something back: a job for his son, running the Teamsters' lucrative insurance business. No matter that Alan Dorfman had no financial qualifications or insurance experience, he didn't even have an office. Such was the power of the mob that Dorfman's hastily set up insurance agency got the contract. The Teamsters employers now paid Dorfman's agency an insurance premium for every union man. And so, for new insurance executive Alan Dorfman, the good times began to roll.
He had very expensive clothes. I remember he wore what was clearly a very expensive camel hair coat. He drove expensive cars. He had a very nice house in Lincolnwood. He went out to eat at fancy restaurants. He had plenty of cash to spend.
The deal worked out well for both sides. Over the next 10 years, Alan Dorfman became a millionaire. And mob-backed Jimmy Hoffa rose fast in the Teamsters Union. But there was a cloud on the horizon. In Washington, the authorities were increasingly concerned by the unholy alliance of organized crime and the labor movement. In 1957, the United States Senate McClellan Committee began investigating union officials and mob associates. That meant trouble for Jimmy Hoffa and Alan Dorfman. Government agents discovered that Alan Dorfman had made $3 million from Teamsters insurance policies. Half of it by wildly overcharging on the premiums. The high insurance fees were not illegal, and the committee could do nothing about it. But committee investigators did soon discover illegal practices. Dorfman had siphoned off over $330,000 in cash from his company for unspecified expenses, and Hoffa had been lent cash that was never returned. A young lawyer, Robert F. Kennedy, was the committee's legal counsel. He asked Hoffa to explain himself.
Did you borrow all this money on the same day, and you don't know what it was for?
What's for expenditures that I needed at that time? I can't recall offhand.
And this was in cash also?
That's right.
And no collateral, no note?
That's right.
And no interest paid?
That's right.
Has it been paid back?
No, it has not.
Although the committee strongly suspected that stolen cash was being used for illegal payoffs and kickbacks to union officials, they couldn't prove it. That left Hoffa and Dorfman at liberty to exploit the wealthy Teamsters union on an unprecedented scale. Although the Teamsters insurance business was a good money spinner for Dorfman, it was dwarfed by the possibilities of the vast Teamsters pension fund. Millions of dollars in workers' contributions poured in every month. The question was, where to invest it? Other funds invested prudently, spreading risk, but Alan Dorfman helped Hoffa pour tens of millions of dollars of Teamsters loans into just one client's pocket, the mob.
Teamsters especially, the pension fund, was a gold mine. It was the goose that laid the golden egg.
The Central States Pension Fund earned the nickname the Mafia Bank. And what did the gangsters do with all these millions? They built casino hotels in the Nevada desert. Las Vegas.
The first casino out here, the Flamingo Hotel, was built by the mob. As a strip group, not all of it was mob money. Most of it was.
The Stardust, the Fremont, and the Desert Inn were all funded by multi-million-dollar loans from the Teamsters Pension Fund. And in the 1960s, these casinos were owned and controlled by the Mafia.
Dorfman was absolutely instrumental in that. He engineered, by and large, the mob's influence in the Las Vegas casinos and the purchase of those casinos with the hidden interests of the various mobsters.
Hoffa and Dorfman approved 60 loans totaling a mammoth $91 million on strangely favorable terms to the mob.
The people who got the loans did not have to pledge any collateral, did not have to have the normal background checks that a bank would have conducted before giving multi-million-dollar loans.
There was a reason for this lax lending policy. Every time they approved a loan, up to 10% was taken as a kickback by Hoffa and Dorfman.
Alan Dorfman arranged a lot of loans. He took a fee on every one of them.
The kickbacks could be huge.
If you want to put up a building, and it would cost with your profit, $900,000 to put it up, but you got to give me $100,000. You make your bid $1 million.
Everybody thought that was fine. There was enough money for everybody.
The Mafia generally didn't like to pay money back. But provided Hoffa and Dorfman got their kickback, they didn't seem to care if the Teamsters never saw their money again. Dorfman and Hoffa were riding high, but 1961 saw in a new government and the return of an old enemy. Robert Kennedy was appointed U.S. Attorney General. As the top law enforcement officer in America, Kennedy's stated goal was to break the grip of organized crime. He set about radically changing the Department of Justice and the FBI. Kennedy launched a new kind of investigative unit, a Department of Justice strike force aimed at union corruption. And Kennedy dramatically increased the number of lawyers in the organized crime and racketeering section from 17 to 63. One unit was very much at the forefront of the campaign.
It was called the Labor Rights Unit, and I was in it. And the press called it the Get Hoffa Unit.
To get Hoffa was harder than it sounds. In October 1962, the unit did prosecute Hoffa, alleging he'd received improper payments from a trucking company. But the verdict was far from certain. Then, they got lucky. During the trial, Hoffa played straight into the government's hands.
If he'd accepted the jury verdict, he would have been found not guilty, and it would have been potentially a major victory for him.
A powerful manipulator and used to getting his own way, Hoffa just couldn't leave the verdict to chance.
He had to fix the jury, and he got caught fixing the jury, and that's obstruction of justice, and then he was convicted.
A maximum one-year sentence suddenly grew a whole lot bigger. Hoffa's mob-style jewelry tampering had backfired badly.
Outside the district court building in the nation's capital, Teamster boss James Hoffa surrenders to U.S. Marshals to begin serving an 8-year prison term for jury tampering.
Hoffa was gone. But for at least one person, this was a great opportunity. Before he went to jail, Hoffa announced, "Alan speaks for me on all pension fund questions." In those few words, the one-time sports coach was made one of the United States' most powerful financiers. Alan Dorfman now controlled a vast $400 million mountain of money.
The title CEO of Crime Inc. would be a good description of Dorfman, or perhaps a better one would be Chief Financial Officer of the mob. I don't think anybody could have done what he did because he had the skills and the character and the lack of morality to do what was necessary for the mob.
But Dorfman discovered he was not allowed complete control. Access to the pension fund was just too important to the mob. The Chicago outfit decided to safeguard the Mafia Bank. They gave Dorfman an advisor, Joey the Clown Lombardo.
The outfit did not trust Alan Dorfman and therefore placed Lombardo in the position that he had, which was an overseer.
Joey the Clown Lombardo was a serious mobster. He may have earned his name joking around, but he was a shrewd businessman and a killer.
I don't think Lombardo respected anyone. I think he had a grudging respect for Dorfman for what he could do. But Joe Lombardo liked Joe Lombardo, and that was about the extent of the people he liked.
It was Lombardo who oversaw the Las Vegas casinos. And now, although he had no official position, guided Alan Dorfman at the Teamsters Pension Fund.
He did show up on almost a daily basis to find out exactly what Dorfman was doing and to provide guidance, to direct Dorfman to make sure that he did as the outfit wanted him to do.
That's the one person you don't hear Dorfman arguing much with.
But the two men got along well. With Lombardo's backing, Dorfman approved million-dollar loans designed to leach cash directly into mob hands.
It was no secret that he was in the pocket of organized crime. He was a tool of the Chicago outfit. They controlled Dorfman.
No matter that a string of businesses invested in by the Teamsters Pension Fund went bust, and millions of dollars was effectively stolen in the process.
Dorfman was a white-collar type thug. He controlled money. Dorfman would never be involved in a burglary or an armed robbery or an extortion. That's not what he did. He was a different kind of criminal.
Defaulted loans to just one businessman cost the pension fund $15 million. But Dorfman couldn't care less. He got paid thousands of dollars in a kickback on every one. Business was so good that he now crisscrossed the states in a private jet he'd bought from Frank Sinatra. But when one such deal and kickback went sour, the FBI pounced. In October 1972, the court in Chicago heard how businessman Leo Horvath had applied for a Teamsters loan of $1.5 million. He had personally paid Dorfman a $55,000 kickback in cash. 2 days later, Dorfman approved the loan. At last, this scam was exposed, and Dorfman was found guilty. It seemed the Mafia's banker was in real trouble. But for some reason, the trial judge sentenced Dorfman to just 1 year in federal prison. Far from being a killer blow to his career, it hardly even broke his stride.
In the 1972 fraud conviction, didn't rat on anyone, which probably enhanced his reputation with the mob at that time. And he did his thing and came out and kept on going.
With Lombardo behind him, Dorfman's looting of the Teamsters Pension Fund didn't merely continue uninterrupted, but shifted into high gear as never before. Between 1972 and 1976, he approved $186 million in loans to finance fevered mob development of Las Vegas casinos. $20 million went to Caesars Palace alone, and $23 million to Circus Circus. And the kickback to Dorfman, 7% of Circus Circus Corporation shares, potentially worth millions. But the FBI hadn't given up the hunt for Dorfman. In 1974, they'd found enough evidence to charge Dorfman and Lombardo with milking the Teamsters pension fund of $1.4 million. Dorfman was again just a step away from a long prison sentence. Key witness for the prosecution was businessman Daniel Seifert, who had been talking to the feds. If Seifert testified, Lombardo and Dorfman were both going down. The Mafia didn't hesitate to protect their biggest source of ready cash.
They had no hesitation eliminating witnesses if it would keep them out of court.
One Saturday, Seifert went to his office to meet his wife. Mrs. Seifert was pushed at gunpoint into a washroom. Seifert made a run for it. The first shotgun blast failed to stop him, but a second blast to the chest brought him down. Finally, to leave no doubt, Daniel Seifert was shot at point-blank range. As Seifert fell, so did the court case. Lombardo and Dorfman walked free again. It was clear to the Department of Justice and the FBI that Joe Lombardo and the Chicago outfit would stop at nothing to keep Dorfman and the Mafia Bank in business. And they were right. Even old friends were not safe. On the 23rd of December, 1971, Jimmy Hoffa had been given an early Christmas present. A pardon from President Nixon. But although released from prison, Hoffa also wanted something else. His old job back.
I have never sold a workaround. I have negotiated the best contracts in America. Nobody can deny it. They don't even try to deny it. I've got eyeglasses, teeth, pension funds, conditions, and the highest wages in the whole world for our people. Talk to our people. Let them be the judge whether or not I'm a labor leader or whether I'm a crook.
The Mafia bosses felt their money machine was working well and considered Dorfman to be an essential cog. The return of Hoffa was something they could do without. Hoffa now rounded angrily on the mob. He spoke openly in the papers and on radio and television about exposing mob corruption and getting the mob out of the Teamsters Union. He even threatened to stop the Mafia from using the pension fund.
Jimmy Hoffa sincerely thought of himself as a tough guy, as tough as anybody in the mob. He never thought that he would come to the end he came to at the hands of the mob.
On the 30th of July, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa went missing.
Hoffa was last seen alive at the fashionable Red Fox restaurant in a Detroit suburb. He waited there in vain to keep an appointment. Hoffa left his car in the restaurant car park when he vanished, and in spite of an intensive search around Detroit, there's been sight nor sound of him since.
The FBI put 200 agents on the Hoffa disappearance and spent millions to find him. To this day, his body has never been found. If the mob thought Hoffa's disappearance had blown the FBI off course, they were wrong. In 1978, the government began to form an attack plan to get rid of Alan Dorfman once and for all.
We were after Dorfman, make no mistake about it, because he was the gear that made everything run as far as controlling of the Central States Pension Fund.
Stopping Dorfman would not only cut off the mafia's money supply. More than that, following the trail of dodgy loans would allow them to convict mobsters throughout the US.
If we penetrated Dorfman and his contacts, we could get to other aspects of his association, which would include the mob, which would include the Teamsters, and as it turned out, high-ranking government officials.
The FBI realized that snaring Dorfman was not going to be quick or easy. To have any chance of success, they would have to use surreptitious electronic surveillance far more extensively than ever before. The plan was to record all Dorfman's phone conversations with his associates in the hope that they would incriminate themselves.
That was a tremendous manpower drain, and it was really a fight to get the FBI at that time to agree to put that many people in the case.
FBI chiefs worried that penetrating Dorfman was looking just too expensive.
They were concerned as to how long it would continue, which was fairly perceptive on their part because we intended to continue it as long as we could.
Another obstacle was that just tapping Dorfman's phone calls was far from straightforward.
Each call that came in on a separate line could have been transferred to Alan Dorfman in his office. And therefore, we could not simply tap one line. We had to tap all lines going into that office.
The problem was that for wiretap evidence to be admissible at trial, they would need a court warrant for each individual line.
We were going to be forced to request the ability to tap into approximately 15 or 16 telephone lines.
But in the end, they decided they had to go for Dorfman. On the 29th of January 1979, a court gave permission for multiple wiretaps, and Operation Pendorf began. The FBI rented offices nearby so the telephone company could redirect the phone lines. Agents could monitor and record all of Dorfman's phone conversations. Immediately, his world opened up to them. On that very first day, they heard Dorfman brokering a $90 million deal for the mob concerning the Aladdin Casino Hotel, Las Vegas.
Dorfman's days, as best as we could tell, when he was in the office, when he was actually working and not playing golf, was mainly communicating with the gangsters, fulfilling their needs, a problem solver, influence peddling, everything you'd think a power broker in legitimate business would do today.
Just how far removed Dorfman was from legitimate business was shown only a few days later. On February the 2nd, agents were stunned when Dorfman's conversations involved loan sharking, a takeover of the Teamsters pension fund, the unlawful use of gold certificates, and even a plan to kill the Teamsters president. And that was just one day's work for Alan Dorfman. Over the next 6 months, the FBI monitored 112,000 phone calls, recorded over 3,500, and focused on nearly 1,000 conversations. But it wasn't enough. The FBI needed to hear all of Dorfman's business conversations, not just when he was on the phone. To do that, they would have to bug his office.
The information that we developed on the telephones led us to have sufficient probable cause to ask the courts for the ability to put a microphone in his office.
But installing a secret microphone infringes a citizen's right to privacy. Getting court approval for this would be even more difficult.
Everyone was a little bit more skittish about that because the expectation of privacy was of considerable concern. So it was often much more difficult to get a bug because you had to show more to satisfy the officials in Washington that this was something that should be done.
Doug Roller won the argument in Washington and persuaded a federal judge to grant the warrant. With this to back them up, all the FBI now had to do was break into Dorfman's office.
We entered Dorfman's office surreptitiously late at night because we had an informant who worked for Alan Dorfman's office. We simply had my informant rent a parking place under the building, and we drove into the underground parking and went up into the building and went into the office.
Agents made 7 night raids to plant 2 microphones. Now, rather than his businesslike telephone manner, they got the real Alan Dorfman.
But all you get from him is Thomas. All I know is we ain't got a thing. Now where the f*** are we going?
He was very gruff, a lot of profanities, and very arrogant, and became angered when what he wanted was not being done.
Did you ever give me a dime, Morris? You ever give him a dime? If you did, I don't know about it. And if you did, I don't give a because I didn't get nothing.
He did not mince words, and most of his conversations were laced with profanity.
But when the FBI microphones overheard Dorfman's meetings with Joey the Clown Lombardo, the agents heard the usually arrogant loudmouth transform.
He would walk around Las Vegas shouting orders like a Marine sergeant. And then when he met the mob boss in Chicago, he was a meek, mild businessman.
What he got out of it? I would say he got somewhere between 3 and 5 million. Yeah, got 25% beyond. That's right. That's the player we want right now. Well, you can make the demands. Make the demands. Now he's in trouble.
Our opinion of Joe Lombardo actually improved as we listened to the conversations. We overheard conversations most mornings where they were reading the Wall Street Journal, they were discussing the articles, and really there was no difference in the understanding of the material on the part of Lombardo as compared to Dorfman.
But there was a significant difference between Joey Lombardo and Alan Dorfman, as Lombardo clearly revealed on tape in a meeting with Morris Schenker, a Dorfman associate.
Alan's meek and Alan is harmless, but the people behind him are not meek and harmless. You know what I mean? And I'll tell you one thing. He says you're 72. I'm just telling you. I'm just telling you. If they come back and tell me to give you a message, and if you wanted to fire him, I assure you that you will never reach 73.
What the FBI had long suspected was now admitted on tape. Joey Lombardo was a mob enforcer and would stop at nothing to back up their money man, Alan Dorfman. Over 2,000 reels of Dorfman at his office, on the phone and in meetings, were recorded and transcribed. Even though he was unaware of this, Dorfman seemed careful and guarded.
Alan Dorfman, like a lot of the gangsters, didn't think that they would be caught. They thought they were too smart.
But Alan Dorfman made a mistake. With the mics on and the reels rolling, Dorfman was chatting with associates when he referred to an incriminating meeting. Thanks to the wiretaps, a jaw-dropping and damning story unfurled. Teamsters president, Roy L. Williams, had a problem with a government bill to deregulate the trucking industry. Any breakup of the Teamsters monopoly meant a loss of money and power for the union. Another person with a problem was Howard W. Cannon, the powerful senator for Nevada. Land developers were eyeing a plot next to his exclusive Las Vegas country club home. The planned 9-story apartment blocks would spoil his view and damage property values. The vacant lot was owned by the Teamsters Central States Pension Fund. At a meeting on Wednesday, January the 10th, 1979, Cannon and Williams met with power broker Alan Dorfman. Senator Cannon asked Dorfman whether he might arrange to sell him the 6 acres abutting his fancy home. Williams asked Senator Cannon whether he might arrange to personally oversee the trucking deregulation bill. They agreed a deal, in effect, a bribe. And to bribe a US senator is a crime. In Washington, Cannon delivered on his part of the bargain. As chairman, he steered the trucking bill into his Commerce Committee, where it was delayed and watered down. But Dorfman found to his dismay that he couldn't deliver on his side. Recent legislation had stopped him dealing in land as he pleased. The bugs heard Dorfman vent his frustration.
In the bug, Dorfman is going on about, how terrible this was. These guys were pieces of shit. And in the old days, we could have just had the Teamsters out there bought in and give it to them. But we can't do that now because everyone's watching us.
A hidden microphone in Dorfman's office on May the 21st, 1979, captured the moment when Senator Cannon called to ask how the land deal was coming along. Embarrassed, Dorfman could only apologize for the delay. After he hung up, Dorfman announced to an associate,
"That was Senator Cannon."
How's he doing?
Huh? He's around like no man has ever been around.
He took care of deregulation, didn't he?
Hmm?
Did he take care of deregulation?
Of course, but we ain't fulfilled our commitment to him yet. I'm surprised he stays in Boston.
Senator Cannon never did get the real estate he wanted. But the FBI did get what they wanted. An incriminating tape recording. A clear record that Dorfman was involved in bribing a US senator. At the beginning of 1980, after a record-breaking 13 months, the Chicago Strike Force went public with Operation Pendorf. The top-secret surveillance had worked. Senator Cannon was quick to defend himself from press accusations of any wrongdoing.
I unequivocally deny the implications of news reports that there is any connection between my handling of trucking legislation in the Senate and the resolution of a land use dispute in Nevada involving a homeowners group of which I was one member.
If Cannon was allowed to get away with it, Dorfman was not. The man who had stolen the Teamsters' millions was still in the sights of Chicago strike force leader Doug Roller.
We felt by the time the wiretap was over that we had a great deal of evidence to put together a prosecution. I felt we had an ironclad case.
But though it seemed that at last the FBI had Alan Dorfman on the ropes, he appeared unconcerned.
Dorfman in court was most of the time an arrogant gentleman. Although he was physically in court, present, that he was aloof to what was going on.
Yet despite the cool veneer, Dorfman was feeling the pressure.
At one occasion during the course of the trial, Alan introduced his son to me and stating that this is the who wants to put me in jail. I just told Alan, you're a real class act, and walked away.
Dorfman faced the possibility of a long sentence, but he may have had reason to believe help was at hand. Because Dorfman could rely on more than just his lawyers. To protect their banker, the Mafia were helping the jurors come to a sensible decision.
Several jurors received early morning telephone calls from someone with a deep, gravelly voice who made insinuations about not knowing the whole story of the case.
When the jurors reported the illegal phone calls to the judge, he immediately sequestered them. They were held in a hotel, under guard, cut off from any outside interference. For once, the underworld's attempts at jury tampering failed. Traditional mob methods just didn't work anymore. No shotgun blasts could silence a witness. As the Pendorf tapes were played in court, the battle lines with the Mafia were redrawn. The accused had now become witnesses against themselves. As Dorfman's tape played, profanity, anger, and frustration resounded in court.
You know, when this commitment was arranged, Roy, you sat in the same room. You made the same commitment I made. Now, the property's gone. Let it go. But I'll tell you something. I don't give a if you have a deregulation shoved up your or whatever happens.
Best evidence you can use in court is the defendant's own words. You cannot undo your words. You might try to explain them away, but if there are enough words there, you're sunk.
On December the 15th, 1982, Alan Dorfman, charged with conspiring to bribe Senator Howard Cannon, received the jury's verdict. Guilty. Operation Pendorf had struck its target, and it was a devastating blow. It was a grim Christmas in Chicago for 60-year-old Alan Dorfman. Although he was released on bail, the new year might bring him a 55-year prison sentence. But sentencing was not for 8 weeks. Plenty of time to cut a deal.
Facing a prison term would not have been something that Dorfman would have looked forward to with his high lifestyle. All the accoutrements of the rich that he had would all be taken away in prison.
There was now concern at the highest levels of the mob that Dorfman might not be tough enough to accept his fate and would negotiate with the Justice Department to reduce his sentence.
There had to be fear that in order to keep his sentence down or to keep from even being put in prison, Alan Dorfman might want to cooperate with the federal government.
Aging, out of power, and facing prison. If ever there was a good time for Dorfman to roll over on his mob friends, this was it.
The number of secrets that Alan Dorfman could have told us, it just boggled the mind. I believe that he could have helped us to completely cripple Cleveland, Chicago, Kansas City, Las Vegas, and maybe Los Angeles. He knew everything.
He heard things he shouldn't be hearing. He's seen things he shouldn't have been seeing.
We felt he would be vulnerable to an offer to diminish his prison sentence in return for his cooperation. Never got that far because the mob was thinking the same thing.
Suddenly, the man who'd loyally bankrolled the mob for years seemed a dangerous liability. Mob bosses decided to put out a contract on Alan Dorfman. On the 20th of January, 1983, Alan Dorfman and an old friend and associate went out to eat at the Hyatt Hotel in Lincolnwood, northwest Chicago. The lunch date turned out to be a date with destiny. Alan Dorfman had just kept 30 years of mob secrets the hard way.
And it's a part and parcel of life in the United States that close association with La Cosa Nostra often leads to a sudden death.
Alan Dorfman's death was a watershed for both the U.S. Mafia and U.S. law enforcement.
I believe it was one of the largest and perhaps most successful investigations of organized crime undertaken during this period.
Without Dorfman, the Mafia's money supply was suddenly cut off. This crippled the mob, and they never recovered.
No one replaced Alan Dorfman. No one replaced Alan Dorfman at all. They did not have access to that bank, and it was part of the death knell of that easy money for the mob.
Operation Pendolph had also done something else. It had proved the power of mass electronic surveillance and revolutionized the use of bugs and wiretaps.
Surreptitious electronic surveillance changed the playing field forever in favor of the government.
From now on, over and over again, electronic surveillance of a large number of mob figures and their operations would lead criminals to condemn themselves, in their own words, on tape. There was nowhere to hide, no witnesses to silence. The FBI had at last found a way to break the Mafia.